and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super, thank you. And I yield back.
Okay, now we have Mr. Langworthy's here. Okay.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of the witnesses for being here today to discuss this very unique topic. And I'd like to jump right into my questions, if you don't mind. Commander Fravor, can you briefly describe your background?
Yeah, I was an enlisted Marine, Naval Academy graduate, Navy, flew for 18 years, got a master's from University of Houston, and I've worked in the private sector for the last, 16 years, 17 years. I do a lot of defense work.
So really gold-plated credentials. Commander Fravor, we have all seen the floating Tic Tac video that you engaged with on November 14th, 2004. Can you briefly talk about why you were off the coast of San Diego that day?
Yeah, we were at a workup with all the battle groups, so we integrate the ships with the carrier, the air wing with the carrier, and we start working. So we were doing an air-to-air defense.
Or windy or anything out of the ordinary on the Pacific coast?
It was actually, if you're familiar with San Diego, it was a perfect day, light winds, no white caps, clear skies, not a cloud. It was, for flying, it was the best.
Now, is it true that you saw, in your words, a 40-foot flying Tic Tac shaped object?
That's correct. Or for some people that can't know what a Tic Tac is, it's a giant flying propane tank.
Fair enough. Did this object come up on radar or interfere with your radar or the USS Princeton?
The Princeton tracked it, the Nimitz tracked it, the E-2 tracked it. We never saw it on our radars. Our fire control radars never picked it up. The other airplane that took the video did get it on a radar. As soon as it tried to lock it, it jammed the radar, spit the lock, and he rapidly switched over to the targeting pod, which you can do in the F-18.
From what you saw that day and what you've seen on video, did you see any source of propulsion from the flying object, including on any potential thermal scans from your aircraft?
No, there's none. There's no IR plume coming out, and Chad, who took the video, went through all the EO, which is black and white TV, and the IR modes, and there's no visible signs of propulsion. It's just sitting in space at 20,000 feet.
In your career, have you ever seen a propulsion system that creates no thermal exhaust?
No.
Can you describe how the aircraft maneuvered?
Abruptly, very determinate. It knew exactly what it was doing. It was aware of our presence, and it had acceleration rates. I mean, it went from 0 to matching our speed in no time at all.
Now, if the fastest plane on Earth was trying to do these maneuvers that you saw, would it be capable of doing that?
No, not even close.
And just to confirm, this object had no wings, correct?
No wings.
Now, was the aircraft that you were flying, was it armed?
No, never felt threatened at all.
If the aircraft was armed, do you believe that your aircraft or any aircraft in possession of the United States could have shot the Tic Tac down?
I'd say no. Just on the performance, it would have just left in a split second.
It looks like that we have a problem here that needs further investigation.
Yes.
In your belief, is this flying Tic Tac, I mean, is it capable of being the product of any other nation on the Earth?
No, like I said earlier, I think it defies current material science and the ability to develop that much propulsion. And I know there's been some physicists have done calculations, which is beyond anything that we have.
Well, either the United States has an adversary here in this world that we don't know, or we really have some serious investigations to do. I really appreciate you being here. Is there anything else about the November 14th, 2004 incident that you think is important for this committee to know that you haven't been asked here today?
No, it's been said it's probably the most credible UFO sighting in history based on all the sensors that were tracking it, and then for us to get visual and to go against the naysayers that it's something on the screen or whatever. I mean, there's 4 sets of human eyeballs. We're all very credible. Of the 6 of us that were involved in the thing, including the video, every one of us is going to do 20 plus years in the military in very responsible positions. So I'd say the world needs to know that it's not a joke.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony here today for all of you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here and the courage it took to come forward and again, the sacrifice that each of you have made. I serve on the National Security Subcommittee for the Financial Services Committee, so I really want to stay in the national security lane, if I may. So when we think about traditional adversaries and both us towards them and them towards us, we probe their capabilities. We look for weaknesses, and we collect that data, that reconnaissance for in the event we need it in the future. For each of you, yes or no question, based off of your own experience or the data that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs could be essentially collecting reconnaissance information? Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Grush?
Fair assessment, yeah.
Mr. Fravor?
Very possible.
Again, in the national security vein, is it possible that these UAPs would be probing our capabilities? Yes or no, Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Grush?
Yes,
Fravor?
definitely.
Is it possible that these UAPs are testing for vulnerabilities in our current systems?
Yes.
Yes, possible.
Do you feel, based off of your experience and the information that you've been privy to, that these UAPs provide an existential threat to the national security of the United States? Mr. Graves?
Potentially.
Yes, sir, potentially.
Same answer, potentially. Yeah, I'd say
Fravor.
definitely, potentially.
Mr. Graves and Fravor, in the event that your encounters had become hostile, would you have had the capability to defend yourself, your crew, your aircraft?
Absolutely not.
Sir?
No.
Is based off of the information that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology and capabilities?
Yes.
By external observation, sure, that could be a fair assessment, yeah. Yes.
Is there any indication that the Department of Energy is involved in UAP data collection and housing?
I don't have an answer.
I can't confirm or deny that in a public setting.
And could you do it in a secure setting?
Yes.
Mr. Fravor?
No, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm the last member to go, but there clearly is a threat to the national security of the United States of America. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility to maintain oversight and be aware of these activities so that, if appropriate, we take action. I would encourage the chairman to demand that we have any and all, but in particular Mr. Grush, talk to us in a skiff. And if that access is denied, I will personally volunteer to initiate the Holman Rule against any personnel or any program or any agency that denies access to Congress. Mr. Chairman, with that, I will yield the remainder of my time to my fellow colleague from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ogles, for the great questions, brother. Mr. Grush, I might have asked this before, but I want to make sure. Do you have any personal knowledge of someone who's possibly been injured working on legacy UAP reverse engineering?
Yes.
Okay. How were they injured? Is it something like a radioactive type situation or something we didn't understand? I've heard people talk about Havana syndrome type incidences. What was your recollection of that?
I can't get into specifics, but you can imagine assessing an unknown unknown. There's a lot of potentialities you can't fully prepare for.
How do you think we ought to handle UAP whistleblower complaints like yours in the future?
Yeah, there was some issue with mine. So, PPD-19 process, it goes to the Intel committees, either through PPD-19 or ICD-120. There's not a good way for the Intelligence Community Inspector General to provide that to other committees. And I asked my information to be sent to the House and Senate Armed Services Committee because there are Title X equities at play, but there was no smooth process to do so. Yeah.
It's a trash can. Are you aware of any individuals that are participating in reverse engineering programs for non-terrestrial craft?
Personally, yes.
Do you know any that would be willing to testify if there were protections for them?
Certainly closed door and assurances that breaking their NDA, they're not going to get administratively
punished for so, yeah.
I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to do something a little bit out of the ordinary here. We're going to give 3 people a chance at an additional 3 minutes. So, Mr. Burchett, do you want to keep going?
Why don't you come back to me, Mr. Chairman? Ms. Luna, if she is is she on that list?
Sure.
Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record an article by News Nation, and it follows Mr. Grush's full interview for the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. Grush, why is it that you refer to the phenomenon as non-human intelligence? Why deviate from the basis of extraterrestrial life?
I think the phenomenon is very complex, and I like to leave an open mind analytically to specific origin.
When you say specific origin, are you referring, can you elaborate on that for those that might not?
If it's a traditional extraterrestrial origin or something else that we don't quite understand from either a biological or astrophysics perspective, yeah, I just like to keep an open mind on what it could be, yeah.
Okay, and referring to your News Nation interview, you had referenced specific treaties between governments. Article 3 of the Nuclear Arms Treaty with Russia identifies UAPs. It specifically mentions them. To your knowledge, are there safety measures in place with foreign governments or other superpowers to avoid an escalatory situation in the event that a UAP malevolent event occurs?
Yeah, you're referring to actual public treaty in the UN Register. It's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, the Agreement on Measures to Reduce the Risk of Outbreak of Nuclear War signed in 1971. Unclassified treaty publicly available. And if you cite the George Washington University National Security Archives, you will find the declassified in 2013 specific provisions in the specific red line flash message traffic with the specific codes pursuant to Article 3 and Article, also Situation 2, which is in the previously classified NSA archive. What I would recommend, and I tried to get access, but I got a wall of silence at the White House, was those specific incidents when those message traffic was used. I think some scholarship on that would open the door to further investigation using those publicly available information.
Thank you. And then my last question with 51 seconds remaining. You mentioned white-collar crimes potentially being taking place in regards to a cover-up. Can you please elaborate?
I have concerns based on the interviews I conducted under my official duties of potential violations of the Federal Acquisition Regulations, the FAR.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I yield the remainder of my time.
Okay, we'll go to Mr. Raskin for 3 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I thank the witnesses for their endurance and service today. Mr. Fravor, you've described your episode in detail now, and you call it the most credible UFO sighting in history. But I wonder, was this the first time that you encountered a UFO or a UAP in 2004?
Yes.
And what was your general attitude or perspective on the UFO discussion before that happened?
I never felt that we were alone with all the planets out there, but I wasn't a UFO person. I wasn't watching History Channel and MUFON and all that.
And have you had experiences or encounters since that happened?
No.
And so have you formed any general conclusions about what you think you experienced then?
Yes. I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and the capabilities that we had at the time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years.
Very good. Mr. Grush, you've been able to answer in great detail on certain questions, and then other things you say you're not able to respond to. Can you just explain where you're drawing the line and what's the basis for that?
Yeah, based on my DOPSR security review and what they've determined that is unclassified.
I see. So you're answering any questions that just call upon your knowledge of unclassified questions, but anything that relates to classified matters you're not commenting on in this context.
in an open session, but happy to participate in a closed session at the right level, yeah.
Okay. And Mr. Graves, you've said that there are dozens of fellow pilots, military pilots. Are there also commercial pilots who've encountered the same kind of sightings that you described before?
They are similar. Commercial pilots have less range and less sensors to be able to reach out and look for objects over wide swaths of airspace. And so pilots are seeing them, commercial pilots are seeing them, and they're typically closer, and the range of what they're seeing is pretty large.
Well, what is the most vivid, concrete sighting with the naked eye of the objects that you described before, the cube-like objects?
Certainly, I think the most vivid sighting of that would have been near midair that we had at the entrance to our working area. One of these objects was completely stationary at the exact entrance to our working areas, not only geographically but also at altitude. So it was right where all the jets are going, essentially on the eastern seaboard. The two aircraft flew within about 50 feet of the object, and that was a very close visual sighting.
And you were in one of the aircraft?
I was not. I was there when the pilot landed. He canceled the mission after, and I was there. He was in the ready room with all his gear on, with his mouth open, and I asked him what the problem was, and he said he almost hit one of those darn things.
He said he was 50 feet away from it?
Yes, sir.
And his description of the object was consistent with the description you gave us before?
A dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere.
Inside of a clear sphere?
Yes.
And with no self-evident propulsion system?
No wings, no IR energy coming off of the vehicle, nothing tethering it to the ground, and that was primarily what we were experiencing out there.
I'm over time. Thank you very much for your service, and I yield back to Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Mr. Burchett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for all three of y'all, starting with Mr. Graves. Why did you come forward on this issue?
I came forward because I felt that my colleagues did not have a way to mitigate this safety threat, and I wanted to help them. I was trained as an aviation safety officer by the Navy, and it just felt right. I felt like I had to help the folks that were still flying and dealing with this.
Mr. Grush?
Purely a sense of duty. I first swore an oath when I was a cadet 18 years ago, and I still uphold that even out of the uniform.
Commander?
I was pestered by a friend, and I asked why, and he said, "You're the one person that they can't discredit, and you'll add credibility to the New York Times article." And so after about 6 times, I said, "Okay."
Yeah. This town isn't made, unfortunately, by people like y'all. We thank y'all. And I do want to also thank the people in the audience and the people that are watching this that can't be, people all over the world that have kept this issue alive. You've endured criticism and derogatory remarks, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. And so God bless y'all. Thank y'all so much. We really appreciate you guys and gals. That's why we need term limits. Y'all keep clapping, us politicians just keep talking. So let me ask y'all, how can the public contribute to UAP reporting, and what avenues you think are available to the public to report these sightings?
Well, right now, I don't think there is a lot of public options for every man to be able to report on this. I think even for professionals that have sensor data that are seeing these on a regular basis, they're still hesitant to come forward. And so for the general public, I think encouraging the conversations that we're having today, looking for technology solutions that can be distributed so that objective data can be gathered is the first place to go.
Mr. Grush?
I'll just touch on the whistleblower side of it. I do encourage, current former military, intelligence community, and industry contractors to come forward in a legal way, either through the IC or DoD or whatever the cognizant IGs are, to join me in this discussion.
Commander, and I guess I should say this for the record. My daddy was United States Marine Corps, 1st Marine Division, so.
Hoorah.
Yes, sir. He was old school, him and Chesty Puller on Peleliu, so thank you,
wow.
brother.
Wow.
Yes, sir. I'm not anything like my daddy. He was incredible. I'm very mediocre, to say the least, but go
You
ahead.
seem to be doing fine.
Yeah.
For me, I was an accident investigator, so the biggest thing to learn, and I think that witnesses need to do is, one, don't try and make the fish bigger than it was. Stick to the facts, write it down, and don't speculate what you think it is because it will sway your decision. Just write the facts down. We can get all the facts together, and we can start to investigate and get a real honest story instead of, it was this big.
Thank you all, and I want to thank everybody. We made history today. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you much, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you. I know now we're going to be making some closing remarks, and so I just wanted to say a few things. First, to our witnesses, I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. I know that it takes a lot of courage. You're telling really important information to this committee, and I just want to thank you also for all three of you, your service to our country. I also want to just note that today's hearing was both important but also serious, and I want to thank our subcommittee chairman, Mr. Grothman, I think for running a very fair and substantive hearing. I do want to thank the committee staff on both sides for the amount of work that it took to put this hearing in place, and certainly to all the members that have been involved in this issue prior to the hearing. I also want to note for our witnesses and for the public that I'm a freshman member of Congress, and I've only been here for 7 months, but this is by far the most bipartisan conversation and discussion that I have seen happen in the Congress. And I think that a topic of this significance as it relates to our national security, as it relates to information that we're trying to gather for the American public, does bring people together, and I think that's been really great to see. I think it's also important to note for the public, today in our hearing, we had on our side also both our full ranking member, which is Mr. Raskin, and our vice ranking member, which is Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, both here at our hearing. I think it shows the importance and seriousness that our side of the aisle is taking to this important hearing, but also to the broader issue as it relates to working with our Republican counterparts on this committee. I want to additionally add that I think it's really important that we have and continue these discussions and these hearings. Clearly, there's a lot of information that we don't know, but it's also very clear that we have to continue our investigation and accountability on asking the right questions and ensuring that they're part of the public record. One thing that was important today is some folks might wonder, why are we asking questions that might already be out there or that have been asked before? It's important that they're asked and put into the public record as it relates to this committee. And so I want to thank you for, answering some questions multiple times. I know, not just in maybe meetings you had with some members, but also here in the public. Let me also just add an additional note that it's important also that our friends in the media and those that are not just reporting on this hearing, but that have reported on this topic and that may in the future, the media has an important role in this process. And it's very important that the media engages, does independent investigation, and reports on not just what happened today, but what they see independently as what is happening around UAPs in the broader community. That is also an important public benefit that we have in trying to get the information and the facts as it relates to this. Let me also just say finally that as a teacher and an educator and a longtime teacher and researcher, that I also really believe in following facts, in doing your homework, and making sure that you follow science as we try to give the most information as possible. And so I want to thank you all for agreeing to do that today. Transparency is a cornerstone of government. We live in a vast galaxy, a lot of unanswered questions, and thank you all for being here today. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd like to one more time thank Mr. Burchett, Ms. Luna for bringing this to our attention. It's a topic that has interested me since I was in school. It was a very illuminating hearing. Obviously, I think several of us are going to look forward to getting some answers in a more confidential setting. I assume some legislation will come out of this. Sure.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I need to compliment the folks in my office that did a lot of the work on this. Rachel and Noah sitting behind me here. They're very quiet and humble, but if without them, this thing would not have come off like it did, so I apologize.
Thank you. I think we're going to want to look into what we can do to make more of this information public. I think there's certainly a time period after which it should always be made public, and people have been concerned about these issues, like I said, since I was in high school. But in any event, I'd like to thank everybody who was here, sticking through the entire hearing. Without objection, the members will have 5 legislative days to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there's no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
The cartels control an awful lot on the southern border, south of the United States. Our men and women are out there. I just spent the last 3 days here in South Texas patrolling with some of our agents, and they're doing a phenomenal job of responding to traffic that's coming across that border.
You and
that
I
plays
both-
out across the entire southwest border.
You and I both deeply respect the men who work for you. And I think they're doing yeoman's work. I've talked to sectors where they're pulling 90 hours a week. These guys are killing themselves. Literally 17 of them have committed suicide because they've been overwhelmed. Why is this huge surge here? What's the cause? What's the difference? You were here under the last administration, during COVID, all the excuses that have been given. So what changed?
Several things have changed, I think, across the world, if you think about it this way. We've seen individuals from 159 countries already this fiscal year.
So why do they feel suddenly, after January of 2021, that they can come here?
I would think that we have what we call push and pull factors. Some of those push factors are certainly going to be economic conditions in their host countries.
Those were there before,
Yes,
Chief.
sir.
I mean, they were there before. Hurricanes happened in Central America before. What changed?
I think as you look at the U.S. and what we're experiencing now with the economic conditions that we have here, when you think about the health conditions that we have here, we're in much better position than most of the countries that we're dealing with just to our
Again,
south.
I would assert to you that all that was there before January 21. The COVID was there before 2021. The economic challenges were there before 2021. I would submit to you that it's two things, and your sector chiefs have told me what they are. One, they're the policies. And those policies came from the promises the president made during his campaign. And two, the State Department has allowed the return agreements to expire. Not renegotiating those agreements has prevented ICE from being able to send people back. Is that not correct?
I would tell you our inability to repatriate individuals to certain countries is a tremendous challenge for us, and I would agree with that.
On the administration. Thank you. I yield. I've taken a little extra time. My apologies to my colleagues. I'll now recognize Mr. Higgins for his comments and questions.
Director Kagan, it's good to talk to you, sir. God bless you. I hope you and your family are well. I'm going to talk to you about China and Chinese nationals crossing the border and HSI's involvement regarding those individuals. It's noted that there's an increase in Chinese nationals apprehended at the southwest border, and we know that many of the precursors that are used to create fentanyl are made in China. A lot of fentanyl entering our country originates in China. And now we're seeing an increase in Chinese nationals being captured, which means there's an increase in Chinese nationals that are not being captured. It's been presented to me, it's been posited that the Chinese that are effectively evading law enforcement at the border and entering into our country recognize that over the course of the next couple of years, Republicans are going to take very aggressive actions to gain control, operational control of our border, and shut down this wide open trafficking that they're currently enjoying. So it's been posited to me that Chinese nationals that are crossing into our country include scientists that are coming into America to connect with established criminal networks to bring their laboratory, to build laboratories here. Are Chinese nationals, is HSI looking into this, are Chinese nationals entering America illegally to connect with established criminal networks and bring their laboratory capabilities here into the continental United States because they know the day is coming where we'll have a Republican president and we'll regain control of the border?
Representative Higgins, thank you very much for the question. Good to see you as well. As it pertains to the human smuggling of Chinese nationals and the narcotic side of it, our investigations, as you know, we're an investigative agency, our investigations and intelligence show that those are two separate situations. We see when it comes to China, that's the beginning of the illicit supply chain of fentanyl. We know, we don't have the visibility that we need, of course, into China, but as an investigative agency, we have the visibility of precursor chemicals as they leave Chinese ports to venture across the water into Mexico. Eventually, those precursors will end up in Mexican labs where the actual pills are produced. That's what HSI does. That's where we are strong, and that's where we're critical to this entire supply chain, which is attacking the supply chain at those critical nodes. We can stop the container ships full. I mean, we're talking container ships. We've seized, I believe it's a little bit over 3.3 million pounds of precursor chemicals coming from China, entering into Mexico. When those precursors enter into Mexico, what we do is try to stop them from getting into the labs in Mexico, where it's synthesized, right? That's where the drugs are produced. That's where the cartels are producing it. We utilize our transnational criminal investigative units, which we have a very robust and strong criminal investigative unit in Mexico. Mexican prosecutors, Mexican officials working with us. As I've said multiple times in open hearings, they're working on behalf of the American people. So what we utilize is their efforts, intelligence community and our efforts in order to stop these drugs from coming into the United States and push our borders out to try to alleviate the pressure on our DHS partners and friends so they're not feeling so much of the fentanyl coming in. But to answer your question, we do not see the link investigatively or intelligence right now of the human smuggling aspect as it pertains to the fentanyl coming in from China.
Well, we'll talk further about that in person. Mr. Chairman, I don't see a clock. How much time?
One right here.
All right, Chief, it's good to see you again, sir. God bless you. Hope you and your family are well. These are difficult times that we face to enforce the laws of our land as we've sworn an oath to do so. And you're at the point of that spear, and to a great deal, you're held responsible. And I think you're a responsible man. I would like to, in my remaining no time, just answer this question regarding commands that are coming down from Secretary Mayorkas. It's come to our attention that many commands that ultimately arrive at the field level don't have much of a paper trail. They've been communicated verbally. You can speak to that, and how does that relate to our aerostat techs? Why are the aerostats down? That's a DOD cooperative operation. They worked. Why are they down? I was told in January they were being pulled down for the first quarter.
I'll give you a real quick 30 seconds, Chief, to answer that. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman, and good to see you again, Mr. Higgins. I will tell you that with respect to the chain of command, Both ICE, myself, and our DHS partners meet quite regularly with the department, more specifically with the secretary. We have constant conversations and dialogue about ongoing operations, and certainly he's made multiple trips down to the southwest border. So I do appreciate the level of support I get from both our commissioner, Troy Miller, and Secretary Mayorkas with respect to some of my requests on capacity building and making adjustments to our operations in the field. With respect to the aerostats, that's a very expensive program, $4.6 million for each one of those aerostats. We have 4 of them deployed here in South Texas. They're doing a phenomenal job. We are looking at alternatives to be able to use similar like technology that may be less expensive. And then we're going to try and do everything we can to incorporate that into our normal operations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll now recognize Vice Chair Guest from Mississippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To both of our gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thank you for the men and women that serve under your command. I want you to know that the frustration and the anger that you may feel today is not directed at you personally, and it's clearly not directed under the men and women that serve under you, but is directed at this administration, which has not only failed the American public, but has failed the officers that serve with you. Chief, I want to expand a little bit on something that Chairman Green touched on. He talked about operational control of the border, and I think you were very candid when you said that we do not have operational control of the border. I want to follow that up with a question. Is the border secure? We have heard repeatedly from Secretary Mayorkas when he has testified before this hearing. He has told myself, he has told Congressman Bishop that. We heard him tell Congressman Roy and a Judiciary Committee the same thing. We've heard the Vice President say that. The Vice President said in an interview with Meet the Press when asked by Chuck Todd, she said the border is secure, but we have a broken immigration system. Then she went on to say, we have a secure border, and that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration, but there are still a lot of problems. And so my question to you, Chief,